You're listening to Leaders Unedited with Keo, a monthly podcast where your host and Keo CEO, Margit Mansfield, sits down with inspiring leaders making waves in Australia and beyond.
Welcome to this episode of Leaders Unedited. I'm your host, Margit Mansfield, and with me I have the General Manager of Digital Technologies at WesTrac, Chelsea Gray. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Now, you've spent a large part of your career in digital, in tech, in resources, and now you work for a heavy equipment manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And it's fair to say these are pretty male-dominated industries.
They are.
I'm curious about how that experience has been for you.
Yeah, so I've been reflecting on this, and it is one of my favourite subjects. I'm very passionate about gender diversity in these male-dominated industries. And looking back on my career, I actually feel like I fit in less now than I did in the beginning. So I think when I started out in my career, and I think this is probably experience for many women, I had a similar experience in terms of my university degree and similar home life to my peers. And although I was often the only woman in the room, I fit in the mould in many other ways. It's really as I've worked my way through my career, and I think in more senior leadership roles, that I have sometimes felt more of the odd one out. And that's not to say I haven't had really positive experiences. I try to bring my diversity to the table and try to remember that is a strength. But there is an element of realising that a lot of organisations aren't necessarily set up for women, and particularly women with children, or just generally people who have significant or shared priorities outside of work. How do I deal with that? I think two ways. I mentioned that I really like to remember that diversity is a strength, and I see that it is. I see that I bring unique viewpoints. I see that some of the strengths that I have allows us to move projects forward. And then I think the second one is, how do I bring more people into that? And that's something I've been able to do, I guess more. I felt I've had more permission to do it as I've moved up with mentees and people within my team. And how do I help women and any minorities feel more at home? Because I think, to be productive at work, to really actually enjoy work, you need to feel that you do fit in. I do think that's important. Yeah, so that's kind of been my experience and how I deal with it.
Wow, interesting journey. And you said earlier that you know how important your diversity is and your different viewpoint. Is it recognised by others?
I think so. I say that, like I've had a wonderful career. I feel like I've had so much support, so much mentorship, so much sponsorship, so many people behind me helping me get to where I need to get to, and that's from higher up in organisations that I've been in. It's from my team. I think I've never had any significant issues where I felt that diversity isn't valued. I guess why I pause is because I do think, this maybe sounds a little bit arrogant, but sometimes I feel like I fit the mould of what that, I'm not that diverse. I kind of fit what they would like, a female leader to look like. And sometimes I see that the diversity of other women might not always be as valued as I think it should be. And some of those pieces that they struggle with, the likability bind and the expectations of, meeting a certain gender stereotype, I suppose, where that doesn't occur. I think it can cause more issues for women than it might for men. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yes. But I think I've been lucky, and I sometimes struggle with this topic because I'm like, well, what do I have to complain about? I've in every job that I've been in, and I've worked in a really diverse range of industries. I started in management consulting. I moved into tech at IINet. And then was in mining, and then moved to WesTrac. And in every company I've had, I have had a very positive experience, and I think I've been it's been a great journey. So from that perspective, I do think organisations are certainly trying to do a lot more, and they do, they understand the business case and they understand what could be, and they're just working out, what that actually looks like in practicality.
And I guess you playing a part in helping educate them about what that could look like. So very insightful of you to recognise that, diversity there's such a spectrum, and some people's experiences might be, they might feel they fit in and other people obviously don't, and you recognise that and are a keen supporter of that.
Yeah,
yes.
And I think that's awareness that I have built over my career. As I said, probably, when I was younger, I was like, this is all great, and, if I've had, I think experience that all women have probably had in that being asked to change how I dress, or being assumed to be more junior when I'm with more junior colleagues, and some of those I think pretty shared experiences, unfortunately. But yeah, overall, there's been a lot of recognition of what my strengths are. I think I've been in an area that has absolutely been growing, and it's an area that I guess it's a little bit, what's the right word, boutique, I suppose, in terms of it's a skill set that isn't necessarily widely held, particularly in, mining and some of the, WesTrac, for instance, heavy machinery, and trying to bring those skills from other industries and educate people in those areas. You kind of have both. Yeah, I have that skill set in itself is unique, and the fact that I know very little about Caterpillar machinery relative to, we celebrated one of our execs 35 years at WesTrac today, which is just incredible. And so, the knowledge that they have, is so strong and so robust, and there's a huge group of people who have that knowledge. It's incredibly valuable knowledge, but I guess I bring different knowledge, and I think there is a strong recognition. If we can bring those two things together, we can move forward a lot faster.
Well, that is one. Your profile did say you have a real passion for blending the analytics with the human, people's strengths, and then combining that. How do you do that? Because I think there's still a fear of technology and information and insights, and it's going to replace, the role and the value I add. So how do you do that in your role now, for instance?
Yeah, so I think it's a challenge, and I don't think by any means I've got it all right. But it is making sure that we definitely recognise those two elements. There is a tendency, like there is in all types of improvement activities and even just different areas of organisations, to work in silos. And for data and analytics, if you want to turn, the zeros and ones into insights, it can't be siloed. You have to have a really clear understanding of the business to create this insight. So for me, it's first of all starting with what the prize is, like keeping the prize in mind. And to do that, you need strong business knowledge. So it's identifying the people in the organisation who have that, and that where they have, I guess, use cases that where data will help. Getting their support first, needs to be the foundation of where we start. And it's only once we really understand the problem and hopefully, have a view of how to solve that you can bring the technical people into the equation. I really think that's how it should work. And I think when you can get those two groups working together and really both owning the solution is where we get to the results the quickest. The alternative is where the business is over the fence. I need these reportings, I need this reporting, I need these KPIs, I need this whatever. And then you just end up with, dashboards, sometimes distrusted data, lack of quality. One of my favourite projects that I've worked on was a machine learning project that helps classify the oil samples that we do at WesTrac. And what was so fantastic about that project was the leadership in the operational area. So we had an incredibly strong laboratory fluid analysis leader that was willing to give time to both, one from a technical team perspective. So, help transfer that knowledge so that the modelling and the data elements could be built. But most importantly, that people side of working with his team on the change management and making it clear to them this isn't about, getting rid of jobs or removing the work they do, but actually something that can help them be smarter, help them be able to work with customers better. And that was the premise. They care so much about the customers. They care so much about protecting, stopping the machines from failure, which is the whole point of the fluid analysis. And once they could understand that's why we were doing it, they were much more willing to help and invest in the solution.
That's a great case study. And, I've been working with a team recently that have talked a lot about insight and predictive analytics, but I think I get the sense that there's still this, we don't quite understand what insight is or what insight will give us. How would you describe insight to a group of people who are really kind of saying, it's the latest, it's the latest trend, but we have no idea what it is?
Yes. Yeah, so to me, all insight is when data is used to help improve decisions, whether that's making them faster, and we can do that by totally automating them, or provide augmenting the leader's knowledge with information that helps them make a decision quickly. And so, or I shouldn't sort of say quickly, make a better decision as well. It might be, it might take some more time. But unless it's either improving the quality or speeding up the time that the decision's been made, then it's just information, it's just data. So that's, to me, what insight means. How do you get there? I think there's a lot to that, and it's a lot bigger than just the data side. I think there's absolutely defining the problem, that businesses, take data out of the equation. Some businesses are very good at that piece, others not so much. But having that discipline of working through and saying, we're really, really clear on the problem that we're trying to solve, and we really understand what we need to know to actually solve that problem. And I like, working in driver-trees, and it's maybe getting a little bit technical, but I think it's important, what's important to me about that is that you understand what is the minimum amount of information that you need, and you can have a relative understanding of what drives that. Because I think with all the information we have and all the data that we have, you can get very quickly go down into rabbit holes, and you can be looking at things that may be interesting, may be insights, but they actually are very small relative to what we actually need to know and what the problem that we're trying to solve. So I think those two things, being really clear on the problem and then having a very clear understanding of relativity of the drivers of that problem, that's when you can start to use data to have insights.
I have a sense you're very good at asking questions, and you ask some really good questions, because that would be how you'd get at defining the problem, wouldn't you? That you ask a lot of questions.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I feel a little bit off-sided
because I'm asking the questions.
All the questions after to give all the answers.
And that was my next question: is how much information is too much information? Because I feel people get really lost in how much information is available. But you've given some good ideas for how you can actually filter out what's important and what isn't.
Yeah, that's right. So I am of the view that more information is always better. But I say that in the context of it has to be relative, and you have to know where to stop. So you need to know, okay, what's the minimum amount of information I want, and then you can build from there in terms of how you can make that better. And there's some amazing advanced analytics that just start to give you some incredible horsepower in how you analyse problems and whatever else. But if you don't have the top level highlights or insights or whatever you have, then the information isn't structured, and it just becomes overwhelming, and it more is more confusing.
Absolutely. How would you try and help a group of leaders? A lot of organisations are talking about, well, our leaders need to be more digital savvy or tech savvy, or there's many words for this. What does that actually mean? And if you were partnering with a business to help them do that, how might you go help them?
Yeah, no, it's a question that I ponder a lot, and we use the word data literate a lot, which is
data
similar.
literacy, yeah.
To me, it's really just about leaders knowing what's possible. like a basic level, and I think you know, that's the first level of maturity, and you know, you can go all the way down to how you skill up the business and build analytical and digital capability and everything else to allow them to self-serve. But as a starting point, and particularly at the leader level, they just need to know, like exactly as you said, to ask the questions and to be able to engage the right people who can help them. So, you know, we have a lot of leaders at WesTrac that are on that journey, and what I try to do is get my team engaged with them, business partnering with them, working with them, just so they can actually see what's possible. And I think that's why lots of businesses on this journey, it takes so long to get started. Like to do one or two of your first kind of data or digital initiatives can take 5-10 years because there's just not the knowledge of what can be. But then when leaders see, you know, over in that area, they use this to make that decision, and we saw that was such a huge benefit them. We put this robotic process automation over here, and that really streamlined that process and freed up those people. You know, look at this dashboard even that they've built, and how incredible would it be if we could turn what we're doing into that. And there's often a big gap of even knowing that those things exist, that are possible, and you know, I have that gap in many ways. You know, there's many companies in the world that are doing so many things that I'm not even aware. You know, I'm not even aware of. But that's the challenge. I think this is an area that moves so fast that we just want to make sure that people are learning constantly what is possible, so that they aren't, you know, always going back to the non-digital and slow and manual way of doing things. And
I guess the next generations coming through the workforce won't even think that it's not possible. They would just assume that there's technology solutions out there, that somebody's doing this somewhere in the world, so let's explore. So there's a new generation coming through, isn't there, that might be already kind of go, well, don't tell me it's not possible. That might be their view. Yeah,
and I think that is such a huge opportunity, and I've heard, you know, of reverse mentoring where you team up those kind of digital experts with leaders, and you know, you're both educating the leader on the digital and data and what could be possible, but also sending that message around, you know, growth mindset, and we can always continue to learn no matter what level we're at. But yeah, no, I definitely think that the future generation will be a huge part of you know, the digital transformation and how we move forward, and just starting to spread that knowledge and know-how through our organisations.
And so what's your vision for where your, you know, folks in your kinds of roles might take organisations? You know, what is possible, I suppose?
Yeah. So it's such a big,
it's a big question.
Big question. And the reason I love this area so much is because I think, to me, it is the biggest opportunity to realise value. And that can be challenging because it's not necessarily, you can't traditionally do a model that shows, you know, you do this and it leads to that. And that's why I think I find, you know, from having a data and commercial background, I find this area so fascinating. But I think it's an absolute transformation of the customer experience, and we have to think of that first. But I think about, you know, how things work at the moment and how we're slowed down by our internal processes, and the fact that often people have to go to, you know, 4 or 5, and they may be digital, but they may be other areas to get information for the customers. It takes us, you know, all time to bring what this, I say silo, but this team over here is doing with what this team is doing. And we do all that stuff, and we are very focused, WesTrac Caterpillar, very focused on the total cost of ownership and making sure that we're always improving, you know, the productivity, availability of the machines. But it takes so much time and effort. And if we can digitise that and, you know, make data available to people where they need it, where they want it, as part of the process, it just allows us to spend so much more time focusing on the actual problem rather than all the manual admin bits and pieces that take up, and WesTrac is by no means unique in this, but take up the bulk, I think, of so many people's time. So that's what is exciting to me. I think you mentioned earlier about some of the change management of people worrying about their jobs and everything like that. But most of this is actually, it's taking away the low value, it's taking away the boring work, the stuff that I couldn't do. I think a lot of people couldn't do, that they hate doing, that they have to do to get to the really fun, awesome parts of their job, which is working with customers generally in helping them solve their biggest problems. So, you know, that's pretty high level, and I can get into maybe some of the specifics if you want of what WesTrac's vision is, you know, across, we think about service, parts, new machines. But, you know, at a high level, it's taking away the low value activities to try and, you know, allow us to spend more time on helping our customers with what's most important to them.
And when you describe it like that, I can't understand why people wouldn't want to do that. So you explain it well for both internal folks and for the external customer, because there's an upside for both.
Yeah, it is. It's both customer and employee experience for sure.
Now, one of my areas of passion is seeing more women in STEM professions. What's your view on, you know, STEM education? How can we get more women in those professions?
Yeah, I think this is tricky. It's similar to the problems we have in male-dominated industries. My husband's actually a maths teacher, so this is a conversation we have often over a glass of wine. And you know, some of the problems are so cultural and so systemic that it sometimes feels a little bit, you know, if not hopeless, certainly very, very hard. It's amazing. You know, it's amazing how many parents still have different expectations for their daughters versus their sons, and you know, that's at probably the I'll say the awful end of the scale. But there's even, you know, the benign comments that it's just so common where mums and women will say, oh, you know, she's just not very good at maths like me, and they're trying to be kind, but they're, you know, again playing into those stereotypes. I think that there's some really promising, I'll say, research that suggests this is the place to start. We can actually make some big changes in this area. So, you know, the one that I think is so important is telling girls that they are just as good, that the research shows that they can do maths, they can do science, that everything is within their reach. And just telling them that before tests, you know, has this significant impact on how they perform, which is, you know, literally just before they do the test, which I find so fascinating and positive, that we could have an impact during that. And then, you know, some of the, I say the friendly items, but the schools and universities, and I know they do a lot of this now, so I think that, like you said about the next generation, making it more accessible for women, so not just relying on that, oh, you know, my dad was in a maths career or a science, whatever it might be. And I guess those informal networks and expectations and widening that and having, you know, a lot of introduction courses and including some of those stuffs early in degrees and that type of thing has shown to have a really big impact in bringing more women into STEM. So I think, yeah, I know some large organisations are really trying to play a bigger part in that as they go, oh, well, how do we solve our diversity or women in industry piece? Starting with STEM, I think is a really great idea. But yeah, I don't
It's
have
a
the
wicked
answers.
problem.
It's a big problem.
A very big problem.
Yeah.
Got to start somewhere, though.
Yeah.
So look, you've had just such an interesting career, and that commercial lens as well as the data is a really wonderful combination. I'm wondering, you know, reflecting now back on your career and you look at your younger self, what advice would you give her?
Yeah, it's a hard one, but I think if I think maybe about my regrets, it's probably keeping the people who supported me and mentored me and helped me throughout my career a bit closer. I've had so much support and been so lucky to have people, you know, wherever I've been, to be able to turn to help me, to sponsor me, you know, all the things that I could never have got where I am without all of that. And I look back and there's so many people from the past, I'm like, I haven't spoken to them in years, and sometimes I think, oh, I wish I maintained those relationships, so it didn't feel like such a big thing, 2 or 3 years later to go, oh, can you help? And now I have mentees, and I think some of them are a lot better at keeping in contact and engaging me. And I think what held me back, and still does to some extent, is I felt like a burden. I didn't want to, these are generally people who were above me in organisations, and I didn't want to waste their time as I saw it. But now I have the opportunity to mentor other people. I know it's not at all like that. Like, there's just as much in it for me, and what I mean in terms of joy and learning and all of that good stuff. So I guess, for my past self and also my current self, I'll want to make the most of those type of relationships. I think that they're so important, and kind of taking us back to where we started in how you fit in and feeling a part of it, and building those connections at work is really important.
Fantastic. Great advice for people starting out in their career. Look, I've loved chatting with you, and thank you so much for your honesty and for your making the digital world really simple, so I understand a lot more. So thank you very much for the chat.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me again.